Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 21st of January, 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson, and joining me by video link today are Charles Malet and Vanessa Beeley. Welcome to the programme, both. Now, later in the programme, Vanessa is going to be taking a look at the behaviour of mainstream media here in the UK and also looking at the situation with Venezuela's oil. Charles is going to be reporting on defections to reform and the UK's conscription agenda, and I'm going to be taking a look at Trump's new Board of Peace. But we're going to begin today, of course, with Davos, because as Ben reported on Monday, Davos is now in full swing, and Trump has now arrived, despite the fact that apparently they had to turn back because of technical problems with the airplane. But of course, he's not the only important person there, because another key person as co-chair is BlackRock's Larry Fink. Let's just have a listen to what he said.
But also places like Detroit and Dublin, or cities like Jakarta or Buenos Aires. We need the mountain to visit everyone, to be a part of everyone's life. So in fact, that's why I agreed to take on this role after Klaus Schwab, whose more than a half century of work, together with an extraordinary, dedicated group of men and women at the World Economic Forum, made this gathering possible. There was an opportunity to make this forum more transparent, and I thought this was the surest way to rebuild trust. When people can see in the room about the debates, about the participation, and about the conversations, and maybe a lot more understanding. That approach may fail in other gatherings. In this one, it's going to work. Because for all the caricatures of this forum, the people who come here, the people I know, aren't here to congratulate themselves, aren't here to pat themselves on the back. They're not here to protect their own comforts. The people I know are here for something bigger than themselves, bigger than their organizations that they represent.
Charles, that would be Satan or something, would it?
Exactly where he was going with that, and I'm not sure it's that much more reassuring to be able to hear what it is that they are talking about.
Yeah, indeed. Well, look, of course, he is a major participant this year as co-chair, and he will, in fact, be chairing the session with Trump later on. But if we just look at this graphic here, he had 5 sessions that he was chairing yesterday, another 3 today. Undoubtedly, he'll have more to do as well. So the session with Trump begins at about 3:30 this afternoon. Now, Politico then was interviewing Borge Brenda, the president and CEO of the World Economic Forum, and they reported that Brenda spent a lot of time over the last year working to get Donald Trump to attend. And they quote him as saying, post Davos last year, I started with discussions with the White House and also coordinating with Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. I also visited DC in early December at meetings in the White House, but also with different cabinet secretaries. And now we're in a situation where Trump is coming, and we also have 5 key cabinet secretaries. There'll be a broad footprint of the US on Davos. So they seem to be trying to reinvent themselves. Instead of the past few years types of topics like global warming, Paris Agreement, sustainable development goals, and so on, it's now Trump and MAGA and so on. And they quote Mike Rubino, who's a former Trump administration official, in the Politico report there. He works for Forward Global and Ballard Partners now. He said that stuff, global warming and so on, has gone out of fashion. But he was also, by the way, talking about Ukraine in that comment. So Ukraine is apparently out of fashion as well, which is perhaps why Zelensky has decided not to attend. So he's abandoned trying to make the excuse that Ukraine's critical energy situation is the reason. Well, besides MAGA and so on, the traditional Davos billionaires are there, of course, but also the new billionaire class, the AI crowd. So Politico reported that Jensen Huang, that particular session, also chaired by Larry Fink, by the way. He's, of course, the boss at NVIDIA. And other people from Microsoft, Meta, Palantir, Anthropic, OpenAI, they're all there. They're all holding meetings there. Also JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Salesforce, these types. But one person that isn't there is Iran's foreign minister, who posted this on X, except, of course, I can't show you what he posted on X because the Online Safety Act means that due to local laws, we are temporarily restricting access to this content until X estimates your age. So I can't show you what he said. I can just tell you what he said. He said, WEF cancelled my appearance in Davos on the basis of lies and political pressure from Israel and its US-based proxies and apologists. And he said that he accused the WEF of having blatant double standards because it had never stopped any Israeli official from participating, even at when the worst of what was going on in Gaza was going on. He also put out a video, by the way, showing some of the organized rioters and during the recent uprising in Iran. But the upshot then of Davos this year may be their attempts to make it more relevant. I mean, we've got to decide for ourselves whether it actually is. I suspect the answer to that is no in most people's minds. We're, of course, going to continue to watch closely and report more on this. But there is a lot going on there, so we'll keep you posted. But let's close this segment with a little comedy, because I'm sure everyone has seen this by now. But my question is, did Brigitte give Emmanuel another smack in the face? He says that the sunglasses were there to cover up a minor eye infection, and that may well be true, but nonetheless, the memes are already doing the round. And bearing in mind the number of transhumanists that are attending this year, perhaps this one is as close to the truth as is possible to get. So there we go, a quick roundup of Davos. We're going to be talking a lot more about Davos in Extra, but any brief thoughts, Charles?
Well, in actual fact, it does pertain very closely to what I'm going to go on and talk about. But I think something I'll come back to is this idea that the sort of the focus might be changing, and that people who have vested interests might genuinely be thinking about changing direction. And that I think it's very hard to get to a point where that makes any sense at all. So with that in mind, and also with the idea that Zelensky has taken well, not actually a seat at all, I was going to say a back seat, but that he's not there. There is this struggle to re-energize the Ukraine situation. And with all these things being connected, it's no coincidence, I wouldn't say, that the Ministry of Defence has recently put out a tweet from Defence Intelligence suggesting that the situation as it stands is that the text will be underlined, of course. The illegal and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is continuing, but there seems to be little doubt that in putting out this tweet, they really are seeking to just keep this in people's minds. Of course, we've had a lot of propaganda surrounding the coalition of the willing, but not necessarily able, and there are many overtures being made about the prospect of a looming war. Now, I've just shown a map, and I'm going to show another one now, because this goes back to July 1940 and has been reprinted in an article published by the University of Portsmouth, written by David Townley, in which he refers back to the 1930s and the technocrats, sometimes also called Technocracy Inc., and they propose merging Canada, Greenland, Mexico, the US, and parts of Central America into a single continental unit. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on that because I know Mike will later in the programme, but I think it's very significant to point that out. And just to go on, this they called a technate. It was to be governed by technocratic principles rather than by national borders and traditional political divisions. Just at this point, Mike, I wonder what your view of that is, particularly given what you've just been talking about with Larry Fink's comments in Davos.
Well, not only that, but what we're going to talk about later in the program with the Board of Peace, and also at the very end of the program with Greenland. Now, and during Extra, actually, we'll probably be talking a little bit about the comments from Mark Carney, who suddenly seems to be getting very nervous about the fact that Canada is being encircled. And I think, that what you've just shown on screen is the intended outcome of this whole process.
Absolutely, it is. And of course, what we mustn't forget is that this is very much joined up and has been, well, it's certainly been running since 2022 when Russia did first make its incursion into Ukraine. And of course, this idea that we must mobilize and be ready for war, to take on a whole of society approach, essentially nudging people towards conscription. And so, on that note, I'm just going to go through a few recent press releases from the MOD, one of which is that they're saying there's going to be a major boost to the pool of skilled former military personnel who can be called upon in crises as the UK strengthens its preparedness. Now, what are they talking about here? They're saying that they're taking decisive action to boost readiness and deliver on the first duty of government, to keep its citizens safe. Well, the first duty of government really should be to protect the powerless from the powerful, but we're so used to having it misquoted, I suppose we just let it go. They are going to increase the maximum age for calling up reservists from 55 to 65. They're going to align the time for which recall applies across all three services so that everybody will be subject to the same conditions. And critically, they're going to lower the threshold for recall so that reservists can be recalled for warlike preparations in addition to the current requirement for national danger, great emergency, or attack on the UK. Now, I've spoken about this at quite some length before, and this is very, very close to a lot of what was being done in certainly the earlier stages in the First World War and indeed in 1939 as the country prepared to enter into a full-scale conflict. Now, the next press release, which concerns the how, is how are we going to do this? What sort of effects are going to be delivered on the battlefield wherever and whenever it turns out to be? And we have an announcement of a £279 million contribution to a new cyber regiment barracks. It's going to be a transformation of the Duke of Gloucester barracks in Gloucestershire. And the Army website here saying that cyber attacks are a growing threat. In the last 2 years, there have been more than 90,000 attacks on the UK's military networks. The government's Strategic Defence Review says that cyber warfare is now at the heart of modern conflict. Well, they might well say that. The bit they gloss over, of course, is that without the use of artificial intelligence, which they are on the one hand so much pumping up, these sorts of attacks would be far less likely to occur. So we absolutely have a situation where technology is in effect playing both sides. The statement goes on to say that to meet the challenge, a new cyber and electromagnetic command is being set up, and this will help put the UK at the front of cyber operations worldwide. Now, the other point to make on that specifically is, of course, that the control of the technology will not rest with the Ministry of Defence. It is, of course, being developed by international organizations, many of which have their origin in Israel, or at least the proprietary technology will be held there, as well as other places. And this represents, again, a significant risk that is absolutely not being discussed. Now, the last announcement concerns the announcement of a cutting-edge drone degree to train military forces of the future. So how exactly they're going to inspire young people to sign up for this remains to be seen, but the idea is that the conflict in Ukraine has highlighted the growing threat posed by uncrewed devices, and it's critical that the UK has both the specialist capability to meet that demand, but also the power and authority to protect military sites from such threats. Interesting to note there that, of course, there's no reference to any threat to civilians. And yet, of course, all of this is predicated on the experiences in Ukraine and in Russia, where there are many, many instances, of course, of drones being used in a variety of ways. And again, it begs the question about the overall use of drones in the United Kingdom and what the Civil Aviation Authority is doing about it, and whether there's any sort of responsible regulation insofar as drones and the perceived threat that drones may offer is being dealt with. I think the other point to make, just to draw this to a close, is that the Ministry of Defence have also been boasting about record defence exports from the past year, but this comes exactly alongside the enormous deficit in resources by way of kit and manpower. So there's a case being made for war with very, very flimsy evidence that we're in any position to be able to do anything about it. But I think the point to fall out of this is that men, young men in particular, need to stand by for an absolute increase of the pressure that's going to be applied to them to enter into some sort of fray, whether that be technological or indeed kinetic.
Interesting you say young men. Just very briefly, I mean, one word answer. Charles, if they're increasing the age for reservists to be called up in the event of a more general call up, then that in fact would bring the likes of you and me right back into the frame.
It would, and this can change on a sixpence, and I will be writing an article about this, which we'll hope to publish next week.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's move to Vanessa then. And Vanessa, Cathy Newman has been back in the headlines over the last couple of days because of a recent interview. What are your thoughts on it?
I think my thoughts are probably not repeatable on air. But good afternoon, everyone, and I apologize for rather saturating this report with sections of Cathy Newman's appalling interview on Channel 4. But I just quickly wanted to show, if you actually scroll down a search of Channel 4 and Iran, you will see that the search itself is full of headlines like this on their news reports. Basically supporting, of course, the regime change narratives, just as they did throughout the regime change war against Syria. But I'm focusing today on an interview that Cathy Newman did with Professor Sayed Marandi. He's a Tehran University professor, but look at it, how it's framed in the title, regime supporter. So immediately he's othered into being a supporter of the elected Iranian government. He refutes the systemic slaughter of protesters. So already she's drawing the conclusion that protesters, peaceful protesters, just as she did, of course, in Syria in 2011, are being slaughtered by the government. So let's just have a quick listen to the first section that I've taken out.
What right does the West have to determine who governs in Iran and who doesn't?
The people on the streets in their thousands who are now being systematically slaughtered in their thousands, they are saying that your government no longer has the right to govern.
Yesterday, we saw rallies across the country, and the footage is online, and it was broadcast live, even though now people like Musk and others are trying to pretend it was AI.
No, these were people who were forced to go out and protest, but people of their own free will bravely went out, and in return, the government, your government, has slaughtered them in their thousands. And for what?
I mean, this is just extraordinary. We're back to Syria again, where protesters are being literally forced out on the street in support of their government. And then if we look at what she bases the report on, it's a report from Reuters about 5 days ago. Iranian official says verified deaths in Iran protests reaches at least 5,000. However, of course, the official is not named. And so therefore, we can pretty much dismiss that report from Reuters as we can the majority of the reports coming out surrounding Iran itself. And then I just want to play a second clip from Cathy Newman.
There are no bodies piling up on the streets.
No bodies piling up on the streets. We've seen them with our own eyes.
No, not on the streets. I live in Tehran.
Well, in the morgues.
And by the way, so then rephrase and don't produce propaganda. You're supposed to be a credible news outlet. 100 police officers, roughly, or officers of the law were murdered. 2 were burnt alive. 1 was beheaded. And we had a nurse burnt alive in a clinic. The clinic was burnt down and she was burnt. She was a young nurse. We had a 3-year-old kid who was shot by these rioters, or the people who you call protesters, and murdered in her father's arms. These are violent people.
Let me ask you,
Now notice there she says that she's seen the piles of bodies with their own eyes in the streets of Tehran. She then switches it to the morgue. So how on earth you can have any trust in what Cathy Newman and Channel 4 are reporting on Iran is kind of beyond me. And then how she dismisses Sayed Marandi's reports from on the ground in Tehran of the people that have actually been killed by the Mossad operatives inside Iran itself. And Israel, by the way, has admitted that it's been supporting the so-called rioters or as they're called, protesters. Then the final clip from Kathy.
These are people who were rioting, and these were people who were shooting at police officers, and there's footage of it. And that footage is online, and it's on the accounts of many people, and people can see it. Mainstream media in the West, and obviously your media, since you are trying to create an environment for war and to justify illegal activity on behalf of your regime and the Trump regime, you're of course creating a narrative of thousands of peaceful protesters on the streets being slaughtered.
If you don't like my questions, Professor Morandi, let me put to you what the German Chancellor said. Friedrich Merz said, when a regime can only maintain power through violence, then it is effectively at its end. Do you accept your government is nearing its end? It's in the final days.
And of course, it was Chancellor Merz who said that Israel was doing its dirty work when it attacked Iran back in June last year. Then let's have a reminder from 10 years ago of Cathy Newman interviewing the then advisor to President Bashar al-Assad in Syria.
This doesn't mean that there is any hesitation on the Syrian government. After all, these are our people. And we are tired.
Yes, and your people are being massacred. Your people are being starved to death in Aleppo. Children, the victims of chlorine gas attacks just less than a fortnight ago.
Seems Cathy Newman's style of interview doesn't change in 10 years. But then I just also want to look at the BBC, and this is Hugo Bachega reporting, one would imagine, from inside Iran. Let's have a look at this.
It is also very difficult to verify the number of people who have been killed across the country. One human rights organization says more than 2,600 people have been killed.
Who is this organization that he's relying on for their figures out of Iran during the protests? HRANA, let's just put that on the screen quickly. And if we look at this organization, when we delve a little bit deeper, if we can just pull up on the screen, HRANA, so this is the news agency for the human rights activists in Iran. So again, you could be excused for thinking they're based in Iran and they're reporting out of Iran. Wrong. Let's have a look at the next slide, which shows very clearly on the left-hand side there that they're based in Fairfax, Virginia, and they're being supported by CIA outreach agency, the National Endowment for Democracy, to the tune in 2024 of almost $1 million. So clearly not a grassroots human rights activist agency, just as, of course, we've seen in Syria and even with the reporting against China. And this article by Mint Press News, which will be in the show notes, revealed the CIA-backed NGOs fueling the Iran protest, because it's not only the human rights activist group. And then finally, I just want to look at this. This is from New York Times, Inside the Fight to Keep Iran Online. Now, what is interesting is that all of these BBC Channel 4 commentators are admitting that the protest died down as soon as Iran managed to shut down Starlink. And in this report from NYT, they talk about grassroots activists managing to smuggle in an entire Starlink network, which kept them in communication with their external handlers and controllers throughout the early days of the riots, when, of course, the worst murders of security forces and civilians were committed by these rioters. As soon as they were cut off from Starlink communication, funnily enough, coincidentally, the riots died down completely. Of course, it's being spun otherwise by the BBC and Channel 4. And Mike, you will probably remember this was from 2012 in Syria. So while the NYT is pushing the narrative of smuggling hope into Iran through the use of Starlink, VARS, again, a US State Department, CIA-linked organization, had a fundraising campaign, Smuggle Hope into Syria. The group's website asked for contributions to continue the smuggling operation. As embassies close, medical agencies withdraw, and journalists pull out, Avaz has the only network that is both smuggling media equipment and journalists in, and images and information out. Sound familiar?
Absolutely, and we shouldn't forget that Avaz is also Soros-backed as well. So, yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for that, Vanessa. We'll be talking more about that in Extra. Now, let's say that if you like what the UK column does, we do need your ongoing financial support. So if you can possibly help us out that way, please have a look at the front page of the UK column website. You'll find a link to take us to the information that you need to help us. If you can't help us financially, please do share our material on social media networks and anywhere else that you possibly can, because that helps us defeat the censorship regime, including age checks, I think. But let's look at what's going on tonight. 7 p.m, Germany's back with another German warfare. Again, looking at the moon landings, that should be entertaining. And then Silk and Steel tonight, why Canada just did a 180 on China. That could be related to their understanding of what's going on with Trump, perhaps, but we'll find out at 9 tonight. And Charles, the blindfold briefing, perverse verdicts, this article is now up on the UK column website.
Yeah, just very briefly, it follows exactly what Patrick was talking about on Friday with the remarks made by Rajiv Menon in the case the Filton Six. But it's essentially, it covers jury nullification and the extraordinarily strong campaign by government to get rid of juries and to stop them being able to acquit based on conscience.
And digital ID protest at the weekend?
Yeah, this is in Glasgow, taking place on Saturday. So if you can get along there at 1 o'clock on the Green, then do go along to that.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's come on to then the Board of Peace, because the other major news from the Trump camp is the so-called Board of Peace. Middle East Eye asks in their headline, what is Trump's Board of Peace and who will govern Gaza? And I'm going to ask, will it end at Gaza? Because quite clearly it isn't going to. Now, Middle East Eye has also published the full text of the charter, and there's no mention of Gaza in it. So it calls for a more nimble, I'll quote this, a more nimble and effective international peace-building body. It says that its scope could be far broader. The Board of Peace is an international organization that seeks to promote stability, restore dependable and lawful governance, and secure enduring peace in areas affected or threatened by conflict. This is published without any sense of, or at least no overt sense of irony anyway, but it gives Trump wide-ranging powers because he will become the chair of the Board of Peace. He will appoint and remove member states, and his decisions can only be overturned by a two-thirds majority of members. Countries that join will serve a limited 3-year term unless they contribute more than $1 billion within the first year of operation. So it's as Ben said to me earlier, it's a pay-to-play scheme. The charter itself seems to revolve around Trump's self-appointment as board chairman. It says Donald J. Trump shall serve as inaugural chairman of the Board of Peace. It doesn't refer to the office of president, or it doesn't refer to any length of term. Membership of the Board of Peace is limited to states invited to participate by the chairman and commences upon notification that the state has consented to be bound by its charter, it says. And it also says that the chairman has the authority to remove members subject only to a veto, as I say, by two-thirds majority. The Board of Peace, it says, is an international organization that seeks to promote stability, restore dependable and lawful governance, and secure enduring peace in areas threatened by conflict. It shall undertake such peace-building functions in accordance with international law. And like I say, there is no irony in this at all, apparently. But then last Friday, the White House, this was before the charter was published, I think, the White House announced 2 executive boards. We talked about this last week. They will sit below the Peace Board itself. Gaza is mentioned this time, but only because the Gaza Executive Board is one of the two boards. The other executive board is just called the Executive Board, and it will have Marco Rubio, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Sir Tony Blair, Mark Rowan, Ajay Banga, and Robert Gabriel, and the Executive Committee for Gaza will have those people plus 2 or 3 others on there as well. Now, invitations have been made to countries including Russia and China, but France has apparently declined. Hungary, Belarus, Morocco, Vietnam, Kazakhstan, Argentina, and the UAE so far, I believe, have accepted the invitation. Trump was pretty upset about France saying no, and he said that if that were true, he would just threaten to impose a 200% tariff on wine and champagne from France. And he also said, well, nobody wants him, speaking about Macron, because he's going to be out of office very soon anyway. So if you can keep a straight face on that, Charles and Vanessa, actually, I'd be very interested in your thoughts, because obviously this is being, at least originally, framed as being something to deal with Gaza, but actually it's quite clear from the charter that he's got much bigger ideas. He's looking at some kind of technocratic infrastructure that's just going to replace the United Nations, as if that wasn't bad enough.
Yeah, I suppose I have to open by wondering if therefore it was Trump that punched Macron in the face, but maybe we'll not find out. Yeah, I think, on Gaza specifically, the two things that immediately spring to mind are the utter failure of the State of Israel, in particular, to adhere to the Geneva Conventions, and also the fact that the International Criminal Court, set up over 25 years ago, has not been signed to by either Israel or the United States. So this seems to be just yet another layer of sort of pick and choose and do what you like, I think would be my view on it. And I'm sure we can talk more about this in Extra.
We will. Vanessa, what are your thoughts?
Well, I find it more interesting to see the countries that were not invited to the Peace Board. And of course, they include all the countries that would have the best interests of Palestine at heart, and particularly Gaza. And that includes Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, Algeria, Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, and even Syria, although, of course, Syria is a little bit more complex, and Jelani is basically doing what Israel and the US wants at the moment. But I would find that more interesting.
Indeed. So, Vanessa, let's come on to an update on Venezuela, and particularly what's going on with oil.
Yes, well, I mean, last week we talked about the Paul Singer purchase of the Venezuelan subsidiary in the US, Citgo, of course, at half the market price due to dear old insider trading, and the fact that he's very connected to the Zionist movement and is pushing their agenda, particularly in the US and to the Trump administration. And on it goes, of course. So this was reported a couple of days ago, unchecked corruption. The first US sale of Venezuelan oil goes to the company of Trump mega donor. And this was at an oil execs meeting on January the 9th. Interesting to see Tucker Carlson there in the background. But this guy that I've circled, John Addison, is a trader for a company called Vitol. And let's just see what they say about that in the article. So Addison attended a recent White House meeting with other top oil execs, donated $6 million total to Trump's 2024 presidential campaign via several super PACs, including $5 million to MAGA Inc. Addison pledged to Trump at the White House event that Vitol would attain the best price possible for Venezuelan oil for the US, so that the influence you have over the Venezuelans will ensure that you get what you want, according to the Financial Times. Now, of course, there has been a degree of uproar about this, particularly from Democrats, and I'm not supporting either Democrat or Republican before people jump in with that commentary. But this is Senator Chris Murphy, after the oil exec meeting, talking about what he thought about the deal.
Well, the bottom line is that the administration is planning to take Venezuelan oil indefinitely and sell it on the secondary market, use that money to run the Venezuelan economy. The Venezuelan people don't get a say. we're going to sell that oil, we're going to get that money, and then the United States of America is going to decide who gets paid and who doesn't get paid inside Venezuela. We're going to micromanage Venezuela. And we're going to use your taxpayer dollars to do it, because this is going to be a multi-billion-dollar effort, right? Which is going to take money, your money, but also enormous time. Donald Trump, the White House, everybody there is going to be spending just as much time running Venezuela as they are running America.
He makes quite a few interesting points, actually, in his statement after the oil exec meeting. But I wanted to show again how Vitol and John Addison are yet again connected into Israel. So this was a report very recently in the last couple of weeks from the Palestinian Institute of Climate Strategy. And they're talking about fueling apartheid, how Brazilian oil and Italian ports sustain Israel's war machine. Now, remember that both Brazil and Italy made statements, the governments made statements to say that they were going to end supply or boycott Israel because of the genocide it had been committing or intensified since October the 7th. Let's have a look at what they say in the article, however. In 2024, so this is the year after October the 7th, Brazil's exports to Israel amounted to a total of 725 million. Around 30% consisted of mineral fuels, oils, and distillation products, representing 2.1% of all the Zionist regime's deals, making it the second biggest partner in the American continent after the United States and Israel's 12th biggest commercial partner. While the Zionist entity's main sources for crude oil from Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan via the port of Ceyhan in Turkey and the Russian port of Novorossiysk, more than 2.7 billion barrels of Brazil's crude oil, 260,000 tons, have been extracted and 8 shipments delivered to Israel since December 2023. Okay, so now we know that Brazil is involved, a BRICS member country, as is Russia, in the supply of oil to a genocidal entity. But then let's see who was helping them circumvent the embargoes by using intermediaries, the Italian connection, Vitol, Saras SPA, and Petrobras. Israel's total imports of oil and refined products are supplied in large part by 2 refineries, the Valero E. Bill refinery in Texas, a key provider of military fuel, and the Saras Spa refinery in Sarroch, Sardinia, each accounting for approximately 17%, representing a combined total of 34%. Saras refinery is owned by the Swiss giant Vitol, the world's largest oil and petroleum product distribution conglomerate, and a direct commercial partner of the genocidal state. So yet again, we see the roots of the operation in Venezuela reaching back into Israel. And I just wanted to point out that we're going to be publishing at UK Column an ongoing series of articles written by Jose Biamorgi, the Venezuelan ambassador to Syria and Lebanon. This is his latest one, which hopefully will be up at UK Column shortly. Is Venezuela a victim of the Trump-Epstein labyrinth? You can also follow Biamorgi on X. And I just want to remind everyone that Mike interviewed Biamorgi, Venezuela under attack. I think that was back in October last year. And hopefully we'll be arranging another interview in the future to run through exactly what's happening in Venezuela.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for that. Now, let's move on then to Chatham House. Chatham House, for those who don't know, is otherwise known as the Royal Institute for International Affairs. It's a major think tank. Now, Bronwyn Maddox is the director of Chatham House, and she gave her annual lecture on the state of the world last week. And in her evaluation, the US has never had a rival like China. It's equal or more in technology, trade, and military power. So let's just have a listen to a short excerpt from what she said.
So this year has clarified what we face. We are in a world of 2 superpowers in rising competition with each other. Each says it does not want a war with the other, but the possibility is not zero. and it would be catastrophic for the world. Even without that, though, their competition for power is a threat to the peace and prosperity of others. In the case of the US's allies, they must now contemplate what was unthinkable, to have to defend themselves against the US itself in trade and perhaps security. This messy world does offer opportunities, I should say. For countries that are not superpowers, there is a chance to play both sides, a reason to make new alliances.
So, Vanessa, your thoughts first, because obviously that's probably may well have been the first time you've heard that, but it just I find it fascinating that the main British policy think tank, or at least international policy think tank, is suggesting that the current situation allows smaller countries, we obviously mean Britain here, to play both sides. Britain would never do that.
No, as if. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of fascinating, as you said, that Chatham House is focusing on the potential of conflict between US and China. And yes, I think Britain now, their policy is changing in the sense that they are being squeezed out of much of the sphere of influence that is rising, that is controlled very much by China and Trump. I won't even say by the United States necessarily.
Yeah, and Charles, she went on to say that that she wants to play both ways with Europe, and she said that was to strengthen Europe's hand with both the US and China. She also said that the UK needs a closer relationship with Europe, and she also said that we need to play both sides with the global South in order to advance some kind of order in private talks and mediation and policy proposals. And with many countries involved, that's the heart of what Chatham House is now doing. So is this a think tank, or is it something different?
Well, I suppose it depends what it is we expect a think tank should do, should be, and the effect that it should have. And I think it's perfectly clear that there are many think tanks that do an awful lot more than just think. I think to go back a little bit to her point about countries finding themselves in a position of, in effect, being attacked economically by America, I think either she's misrepresenting the situation or she's talking about extreme naivety on the part of any country that doesn't think that America would turn around and stab it in the back. But then again, I think that descriptor would apply to very many countries, not least this one. And on the sort of playing both sides, yes, okay, that may have been something that had been done very, very effectively many years ago. Now it looks, specifically with China and the United States, I would say it looks like we are being played by both sides. The United Kingdom is being played by both sides, and I would say, at least at the political level, it looks like the same situation with the European Union and the global South as well. I don't really see that the United Kingdom comes out of this very well.
Okay, well, we can definitely talk about that an extra for sure. Charles, let's move on back to the UK, I suppose, and the schools bill. Just introduce this.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, the schools bill, or at least the children's wellbeing and schools bill, have very little to do with children's wellbeing, as will be articulated in this recording. But it's now at the report stage in the House of Lords, and among the sticking points are this consistent identifier, effectively a digital ID tool, which has a very, very low threshold for data sharing, and the predication of the whole bill, which is really that children are a problem, parents are irresponsible, and this will deal with both of those things, rather than allowing any suggestion that parents might be responsible and indeed might be looking out for their children in protecting them from what they see as a form of education that's not appropriate. But this is Will Coleshill reporting from a recent protest against this bill.
People are really petrified that they're literally going to lose their way of life. And it's literally putting the state between the parent and their child. It's like they've forgotten how to trust the parent.
Hello, this is Will Coleshill reporting for UK Column. Today I'm down here in Westminster covering the Schools and Children's Wellbeing Bill, a bill which looks like it could end home education in this country as we know it.
Okay, so I'm Michelle Zahir, and we're part of a campaign group of parents, educators, child advocates, social workers in amongst our campaign as well, who are a campaign group against the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. Because basically we absolutely say yes to children's wellbeing. Unfortunately, they forgot to put that in the substance of this bill.
Well, I've been home educating Anya for about 4 years now, and we don't want other families to have the rights to do what we've done taken away.
Stand very strongly against the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill and all of the things within it which are actually going to cause harm to young people, from the unique identifier, which is digital ID for kids by stealth, and the home education register, which is actually really there to restrict the access to educational options for young people.
Most people have only heard about the breakfasts. They haven't heard about the fact that it's changing the position of data, so it effectively makes children have no data privacy, because now no consent's needed by parents to share for as low as may promote welfare. At the moment, current position is safeguarding. Absolutely, you should share information if a child's at risk of safeguarding. But to drop it to may promote welfare, they don't need consent of the parents, don't need the consent of the child.
Children from birth will be ascribed a digital identifier. There's been no discussion, no consent. Whilst the government say that they've done a U-turn on mandatory digital ID, what this shows is, like with One Login and the directors and the encroaching infrastructure everywhere, that this is carrying on.
And the government kindly have added some extra amendments in last week. They now have added in, from the point of deregistration, within 15 days, the local authority must consider where the child lives. So we're adding home visits in for no reason of suspicion, not because of safeguarding risk, just because you happen to choose a non-mainstream option for education. Perfectly lawful option, which just is the wrong position for it to be at. And they're also going to do a pilot programme where now you'll have to have a mandatory meeting before you can deregister, even if it's a mainstream school, and the parent must attend, and there's an expectation that the child will attend.
What's the biggest problem for you?
Problem with the bill?
Yeah.
The home visits.
At the moment, with the legislation, we can say, no, we're going to do all of our communication in writing, we're going to provide a report, but with the children's bill, they could insist on coming to our home.
And they're not even looking at people who are qualified social workers, so they're not someone who's actually been trained how to assess. It's just the, and if you look at, well, you can look at what EHE qualification officers are. Some barely don't even need GCSE.
At local authority level, there is a huge risk of bias, of any policy coming through being not adhered to properly.
We've heard so many stories from across the country of people demanding information that they're not legally, the local authorities are not legally entitled to.
What are the charges that can be laid against you if you do not comply and you say that you wish to educate your own children?
Right, see, this is where it gets really interesting, because the government keep trying to twist it and go, well, no, it's not really criminalising you, you'll just get a school attendance order. Now, if you fundamentally believe in electively home educating, you're not sending your child to school. So you're not going to comply with a school attendance order, because a school attendance order requires you to enrol your child in school. But if you actually think, no, actually, we are educating, then they can prosecute you, and that's a criminal prosecution, to the courts. And at the moment, obviously, if you prove that it is a suitable education, you're acquitted and it's all fine. But at the moment, the maximum is a fine. But they're introducing a fine and or prison. So really, is it appropriate? Because I didn't fill in a bit of information. Oh yeah, because also there's bits about not having accurate information. Because I didn't give you the right information you wanted, that your parent could, face prison time.
It's not going to make the problem go away by putting the parents in prison.
The airport security philosophy there applied to education, and there's no indication really at any stage, certainly not the report stage, that the concerns that are being aired there are in fact being dealt with. So thanks to Will Coleshill for that report. Now, I'm going to go on and talk about what are being put out as threats to democracy, and indeed how the response is being dealt with. And so I'm going to start with the statistic provided by Unlock Democracy, talking about the number of local elections which are under threat as of this year, looking ahead to May, where 63 local authorities may not conduct local elections. And of course, we must remember that the Reform Party has managed to generate an enormous groundswell of support via exactly this tool. So they would have a very keen interest in democracy, one might think. It's already been mentioned, of course, that Nigel Farage has gone to Davos. So we're just going to wind the clock back and listen to which way the wind was blowing back in 2020.
It's Davos time, the World Economic Forum, set up by people years ago who wanted big politics and big business to work together. And they had this little gathering in a ski resort in Switzerland, and now thousands of people go every year. And of course, it reached its absolute peak under people like Tony Blair and Clinton and Obama. And really, all the arguments for globalism have been there at Davos for the last 50 years and more. No space for the little man. No space for the nation state, really. No space, certainly, for the small entrepreneur. And what I thought was so delightful this year was that Donald Trump went along and just blew the whole thing up. Just told them, look, hey, you know what? You all said my America First policy would be a disaster. We're doing really well. We've got the lowest unemployment in 50 years. We've got good growth. We've actually got more black and Hispanic people now working than ever before, and poverty in those sectors being reduced. And they all sat there in complete stony silence. And I think it's really interesting to think that what's happened to us over the course of the last 50 years is we've decided nation states don't matter. We've decided national democracy doesn't really matter, because we can decide all of this in ski resorts in Switzerland. Isn't it wonderful? It's called globalism, and then we can bow down to the European Union or perhaps give the United Nations some more power. And this is the importance, I think, of what Trump has done. It's the importance of what Brexit symbolises. Most of us, people with common sense, believe that the nation state run on democratic lines is much better than people deciding our futures in Swiss ski resorts on their annual jaunt to Davos or wherever else it may be.
So Nigel Farage there attempting to invoke the spirit of Trump, or at least that's what he's trying to do this year. He's put out a short statement today about going there in order to effect change, but critically to suggest that he doesn't want there to be any undue influence in the politics of the United Kingdom, the sovereignty of the United Kingdom. And this is something of a sticking point. We spoke about defections to reform last week, and in the intervening period we have yet another. We talked about Nadeem Zahawi last week, and here we have Robert Jenrick there committing criminal damage, putting a flag up onto a flagpole. Of course, Palestine Action have been prescribed as a terrorist organisation for criminal damage, but no comeback for Jenrick. And also Andrew Rossendale there with Boris the Destroyer Johnson. So all of this, which I will come on to explain why, looking very much like the interests of reform are not going to serve the United Kingdom, but instead now a confluence of the globalist and corporate entities contained by the World Economic Forum and the State of Israel. Now, Jenrick and Rossendale, both friends of Israel, conservative friends of Israel, with thanks to Declassified UK for their thorough data on all of that. Robert Jenrick, of course, also reported by the Byline Times from 2024, having accepted donations from a family friend who also turns out through Quantum Pacific Corporation to be a supplier of arms to Israel. And Jenrick, again, just to make sure there's no doubt in anybody's minds as to where his loyalties might lie, talking about a Star of David being displayed at every point of entry into the United Kingdom. So I think this gives a good idea of the interests of the Reform Party as they are now. And again, with thanks to Alex Creel, I referred to Richard Tice's visit to Israel back in October, and it turns out this was paid for by the Reform Friends of Israel, incorporated in June last year and described as being for public relations and communications activities. Now, all of this leads to, as I say, sort of the suggestion of undue influence. And this is where we come on to the very much related issue of the resignation of Craig Guilford, Chief Constable of West Midlands Police until recently, and the man at the centre of the Maccabi Tel Aviv Aston Villa scandal or debacle, or however one wants to describe it. The Inspector of Constabulary put out a statement recently describing this as being a disaster of confirmation bias, having influenced the police recommendation to ban the fans. And in particular, they highlighted the fact that the force failed to engage with representatives of the local Jewish community early enough. And they went on to say that in its communications, West Midland Police placed too much emphasis on the potential and previous behaviour of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans and didn't reflect wider concerns about public disorder and protest. So quite staggering to see how this cuts both ways with regard to potential and previous behaviour, and the way in which many of the tangles that people are finding themselves in the criminal justice system at the moment are based exactly on potential and previous behaviour, and so much legislation in the pipeline pertaining to exactly that thing. But now we'll have a quick look at the video at the start of the second meeting of the Home Affairs Committee into this.
Order, order. Can I welcome our first panel today to our follow-up session following the session we held at the beginning of December on the policing of the Aston Villa Maccabi Tel Aviv football game. Before we start, if members of the committee could declare any relevant interest, and I will declare that I am a member and officer of Conservative Friends of Israel.
I'm a member of Labour Friends of Israel, Labour Friends of Palestine, but I'm also, for 40 years, the spouse of Lord Mann, who's the government's independent, unpaid advisor on anti-Semitism.
And I'm the all-party parliamentary group chair against anti-Semitism. Sorry, the chair of the all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism.
I'm a member of Labour Friends of Israel. I travelled with Labour Friends of Israel to Israel in May of last year. I also attempted to travel to Israel with the Centre for the Advancement of Arab-British Understanding, and was banned from entry into Israel later in the year. So I've been twice, but only got in once. I'm also a member of the Board of Deputies of British Jews.
And I received a donation from the Lib Dem Friends of Israel before the last election.
So on the subject of undue influence, something of a theme there. And of course, this has articulated very well the way in which the language is manipulated in order that it seems like it's a campaign against people of Jewish faith rather than against football hooligans who subsequently went on to conduct violent behaviour in a derby in Tel Aviv just after that decision was making. Now, that is not at all to excuse the very, very poor performance of West Midlands Police in arriving at the decision that they did. But that is, in this circumstance, somewhat beside the point. And I just want to round off with a clip from Nick Timothy, MP, who, of course, was one.
Aston Villa in the Europa League tonight played Maccabi Tel Aviv. And after a very nasty campaign by Islamist thugs, Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters have been banned from attending the game. Our activist councillors like Wassim Zafar and Mumtaz Hussain got to ban Israeli Jewish football fans from the city. And West Midlands Police went along with it. They said it was for safety reasons, but it was an admission that they can't protect Jews in Britain from Islamist rabble-rousers and thugs on our street. Do you think you have a right to Chatham-style test of the IDF?
That's the IDF. I never heard that being said. So sure. I feel like you're just saying that to manipulate the media.
Right,
you know what I mean?
You did say.
I feel like people like you come here intentionally to cause trouble.
No, really? You think I'm causing trouble?
You guys are here. You lot don't live here. You lot live in probably your country areas and
really?
This and that, your nice little posh areas.
Really?
You lot cause a problem for our families who live and reside here. You know what I mean?
Well, I've got a season ticket here and I went to school up the road actually, so I have every right to be here.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we got the same right.
How do you feel about Jews being banned from coming to the game this evening?
I feel like those fans that got banned coming, it's good they got banned.
You feel what?
It was good that they got banned from coming.
Yeah?
Definitely.
So you feel proud that Jews aren't allowed to come to a football match in Birmingham?
I'm glad they got banned, because if they came here, they would have 100% caused problems. And if they caused problems, we would have had to defend ourselves.
What's his name? He's not sincere. What he's doing here.
I'm very sincere.
Sorry?
I'm very sincere.
I'm good for you then.
Yeah.
You don't need
to want to defend your views?
I don't need to defend my views. I have my views, you have your views. So why do I need to defend my views?
Why wouldn't you want to?
Do you want to defend your views?
So can you not put your hand in my face? Can you not put your hand in my face?
Okay, no, it's okay. Do you actually accept that Israel is doing the genocide?
No, I don't.
So they're not doing the genocide. So they're not doing it. Sorry. Let me ask a question. You believe that they are not doing a genocide, yeah? Is that my right?
Doing a genocide.
Okay, thank you. End of story. Why do you want to chat with somebody like that?
So the manipulation of the language there, perfectly astonishing. And I know I've gone over slightly on time, so just hang the question in the air, which was how long till Nick Timothy defects to reform?
That's a very good question. Yes. Well, look, we're gonna finish on a slightly different note, and we'll talk a little bit about Greenland here just for 1 minute. So first of all, want to let everybody know, you may have seen it on social media, that on the 4th of August 1916, the US government issued a declaration to the Danish government that would saying that it would not raise objections if Denmark extended its interests to Greenland to include the entire island. This was surprising, according to this article in Nordics Info, based on the 1832 Monroe Doctrine that we talked about in previous news programs, which of course was intended to limit European colonialism. But this declaration absolutely paved the way for Denmark to take control of Greenland. And this is problematic for Trump because a declaration, although it would not normally have the force of law, in this case, the declaration was added as an addendum to a treaty, and the treaty was for the sale of the Danish West Indies, now the Virgin Islands, the US Virgin Islands, to the United States. And the declaration went through the full ratification process. It was approved by the Senate on the 7th of September 1916, was ratified by the President on the 16th of January 1917, and proclaimed on the 25th of January 1917. So although under normal circumstances a unilateral declaration by the United States would not be binding, in this case it is binding because it was part of that treaty, which was ratified, went through the full ratification process, and is therefore constitutional. So it's domestic law we're talking about here, not international law, and it's much, much harder for Trump to breach that. But in the meantime, of course, we've had the European invasion force there to scare Trump into staying away. At least that's if the Western press is to be believed. We had 15 French, 13 German, 2 Norwegian, 3 Swedish, 2 Finnish, 1 British and 1 Dutch military personnel turning up from the Arctic Endurance Group. But then the Germans immediately turned around and went home again, as we can see here. And this Reddit post headlined Blitzkrieg on ice. German soldiers came, conquered Greenland, and left the next day. So the question is, why did they leave? Well, apparently it was because it was just too cold. So Germany had cold feet in Greenland. Berlin says early departure took place according to plan and was driven by adverse weather conditions. I'm not quite sure how it can be to plan, but driven by weather conditions. There you go. It's all very strange. We'll talk about that in extra, I've no doubt. But we'll leave it there for today. So thank you very much to Vanessa and Charles for joining me, and for everybody that's been watching. If you're a UK Column member, stick on the live stream for extra. If you're not a member, then maybe you'd like to join us and you can take part in that as well. We'll see you there in a few minutes. Otherwise, don't forget the interviews. There'll be an interview at 1 p.m. tomorrow. And we'll be back at 1 p.m. of course, as usual, on Friday. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.